Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. I'm Mark Stein, Thrive founder and your podcast host. We're creating sustainable, inclusive, and multi-generational residential communities. Our mission is to combat the epidemic of isolation, revitalize communities, and help others discover the many benefits of engaged community living by offering unique and ecologically sustainable co-living options. In this podcast series, join us as we discuss co-living, in addition to bringing you interesting people from around the world who are doing cool things to expand your knowledge and satisfy your curiosity. Through this podcast, learn more about our concept and see how Thrive co-living communities will bring together people from all walks of life who want to enjoy the best of independent and group living. To find out more about us, please visit our website at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. Thanks for watching and enjoy the podcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living Communities podcast. I'm your host, Mark Stein. I have Kyle DeHaas, a friend and colleague, with me today, and we're going to have a discussion on technology, appropriate use of technology, and the appropriate place for it in our lives. We have discussed this in the past and had an interesting conversation, so I asked him if he would be on the podcast. So, Kyle, welcome, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me here.
So, I'm a huge Tesla fan, and all things that they're doing. They demonstrated a Tesla bot this week, folding a T-shirt and putting it in a basket. So that part of their technology is growing fast. The full self-driving is very close to being launched widely in alpha, not just beta. And of course, AI is making huge, fast strides. So I'm a real proponent, although I have some concerns, and I'll discuss those today. And Kyle has an interesting take on it. And so, Kyle, first of all, talk about your background because you do have a tech background. So talk a little bit about where you're coming from, and then maybe lay out where you are today about it, which is, I think, different from when you were more active.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, my undergrad degree is management information systems, and I spent a good portion of not only my teen years learning how to program computers, but also professionally, um, building enterprise class systems and basically watching and assisting the world become automated over time, which has been really fascinating. I always thought that this is a great time to be alive, that there's so much that has happened in terms of the advent of the internet, and the advent of the Internet of Things, and AI, and what's to come. So it's been really fun to be involved with it over the past several decades.
Yeah, and I remember the first PC. I had one. It was as far as I can remember, it was a TI 99. It was a keyboard only. It connected to a cassette recorder for a storage device. And the only thing I remember it doing, it probably did some other things in later years. I remember it only playing Pong, enabling you to play Pong on a TV set. So
Yeah, I remember that. With my neighbor had the TI 99 4A, which is the config exactly what you're describing. We had a lot of fun, but boy, it was a real pain waiting for that cassette to load a program.
yeah,
Our first computer at home was an Apple IIe, which was contemporary and I guess a successor in a way, a much more wildly successful version. But I had other neighbors with the Radio Shack TRS 80. We called it the Trash 80, the
yeah,
Commodore 64, all that stuff. Yeah, that was kind of the first gen proliferation of the home computer in the 80s. And it was fun to play with those, you know, and fun to learn how to make them useful.
Do you remember the sound of dial-up internet?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you imagine having that going off in an office these days?
Yeah, I don't think so. But yeah, I had a Hayes modem. It was a 1200 baud modem in the 80s. And I grew up in Houston, and Houston had a huge BBS community, a bulletin board service. So I could dial up and dial hundreds of bulletin boards and download all sorts of programs and things that I could, you know, either play or like compilers, you know, games to play, compilers, programming languages to build, uh, online books and things. It was really amazing.
Just to take a step backwards. In college, I had access to their mainframe computer, and you punched cards, uh, this size card, and carried around a box of cards. God help you if you drop that box, or just had one out of place, then the whole thing would not work. So,
Yeah, those were the days. I missed those days. Thankfully, I heard about them. By the time I was at the university studying management information systems, we were starting off with Macs, but then pretty quickly moved to like a VAX, like a digital VAX type of mainframe that thankfully had green terminals that we could type everything in instead of punch cards. So we thought it was we had it easy compared to y'all.
so maybe just to trace the progression, we'd have the birth of PCs and Macs. We'd have the internet, birth of the internet, then mobile, I guess, and mobile apps and the mobile uh, platforms. Then the social media era, I guess, would be next. And now the AI era.
Yeah,
Does
and
that
big
sort of,
data just sort of wedged in there
right?
between social media and AI. Yes.
Uh, quantum computing, fast computing, sort of right before this AI era. Okay.
Yeah. I think quantum can be really disruptive. That's, I think, yet to come, but boy, uh, that's going to make encryption really difficult and
Especially
challenging.
when you combine AI and I have a podcast coming up with someone who has an IT specialty, and uh, something that I've heard is that one of the reasons that AI doesn't do math very well is because of encryption, and that they're holding it back because it could break encryption, which all the banking system, everything is encrypted and protected.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about your approach now and where you are with computing, with technology, and some of your concerns.
Well, it is an interesting approach, I suppose. You know, I grew up being pretty tech savvy, right? And I think there's a big distinction that we must make in our relationship with technology between being tech savvy and tech dependent. And I think my personal stance is that I like being tech savvy. I like understanding how it works, how it's built, what's going on, the plumbing behind it. I don't necessarily like being tech dependent. In other words, I like building the machines, but I don't like having to rely on them for everything. Um,
And
and
give some
so,
examples of where you're more, um, what's the opposite of digital? Uh,
analog.
Analog. Where are you more analog?
Well, I like to communicate by ham radio, so that's really fun. That's a great hobby of mine. It's very technical. It's you have to be tech savvy to do it, but I'm not really tech dependent, if that makes sense. You know,
Mhm.
it's but I think in a more day to day aspect, you know, I'm really skilled with a paper map and compass. I think that early on in my teen years as a delivery driver in Houston, where you pretty much just had to memorize all the streets when you're making a delivery, pizza delivery, that skill hasn't eroded. I don't, I do most of my travel by car, and I do not really like to rely on Google Maps all that much. Um, I'm a big fan of being off grid. In other words, if I'm going out to hiking or camping or whatever it is that I'm doing, it's pleasant for me to have no internet access at all, no phone, no nothing.
So you don't
Um,
take a phone and just not rely on it. You don't take a phone.
I take a phone because it's
Okay.
my camera, and I like to take pictures when I'm out there.
Okay.
But the phone is on airplane mode, because that saves the battery. If I can't connect to a cell tower, there isn't any use for it to try, so I just tell it not to, right? Um, so yeah, the phone becomes my camera, really.
Okay.
Yeah, those are some examples. So I find it interesting to not be so tech dependent on everything that I do, to not just, intrinsically pull up a phone as the panacea solution for whatever problem that I've got right now. And I think that regular practice of doing that is healthy, especially when there is a push, just generally and culturally, to uh, to be connected all the time.
And to be entertained, I think. I've noticed I'm in Tampa Bay, and the stoplights are interminably long, some of
Mm,
them. So I'll find myself pulling out my phone uh, to check something when I'm at a light. I also notice that when I'm at the beach, I've actually done this where I count the number of people who are sitting at the beach on their phone, and
yes.
it's over 50%, pushing 75, 80%.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, absolutely. And not just the beach, but anywhere you go, pretty much. And so when we notice, I think when you've grown up in a time where that didn't exist, and you look around at the creeping normalcy of tech dependence, especially on mobile devices, and you just stop and look for a moment. And I think that, first of all, stopping and looking. So, situational awareness, I think, generally is important for all of us to have. Like, be aware of your surroundings, because there's so much that you can learn, and there's dangers you can avoid, right?
yeah.
Now, if you are on your phone, you're not situationally aware. You're checked out of your immediate surroundings. Um, so it is fun to, like, just put your head on a swivel, look around, and see, well, who's not paying attention? What interactions might you have had 30 years ago that you're not going to ever have now, because there isn't anyone to interact with when they're not situationally aware that you even exist. Um, so that's kind of, it's fun. It's funny, but not in a ha-ha way. It's just interesting, and I'm certain I'm not alone in just noticing that. But I think then we haven't evolved that way, and so I think part of the challenge, and there's multiple challenges to tech dependency, is that we have this godlike technology that we have built, but our brains are simian, and we do not evolve in the same speed that technology evolves. So I think we might be at a point fairly soon, if we're not already there, where we've kind of gotten ahead of our skis a little bit, and we've created some new problems from this amazing technology that our mammal brains really just can't handle all that well.
Mm. And maybe that relates to suicide levels of teenagers where they're on the phone, and I'm not sure that they can't keep up. I mean, and maybe our brains are evolving evolutionary in an evolutionary way, because I do sense some differences in the way younger people use and have adapted to technology.
Yeah.
Um,
Or
it does.
rejected it.
Hmm. Do you see that much rejection of technology with younger people?
Yeah, but I do it. I wouldn't say that it's the exception rather than the rule. That's what I would say.
Okay.
But I have seen it, and it has to be an intentional act for somebody like my child's age. All those people are in their early 20s at this point, and so that means that they've grown up entirely post 9/11, 21st century. uh, Technology is ubiquitous to them, and so it becomes reflexive for many of them because it's being shoved down our throats, so to speak, to just use all that tech and become dependent on it. And it becomes an intentional act to selectively reject it in favor of doing other things. So I would say, like, my child made a conscious decision to just quit using social media entirely. Um, After discovering time and time again that often a source of misery comes from that vector. Um, and I don't blame that decision at all. I think it's been really healthy and positive, right? And there's appropriate use of technology, but it hasn't taken over that person's life, right?
Mhm.
Um,
You know, I also watch people in restaurants, and it's amazing how many families are sitting at the dinner table, probably at home too, and everybody's on their device. And if they're not on their device, when the first person picks up the phone to check email or whatever they're checking, then everybody, I don't know if you've noticed this, that everybody takes the opportunity
yep.
to check in.
Yeah. And that reminds me of something that happened a couple of weeks ago when I was at a restaurant with somebody who wanted to share some experience, and started playing a video, and the volume was really loud, and I was like immediately kind of cringing and embarrassed about it, and I'm like, hey, can you just like mute it? Like, there's not everyone, I think, has that sense of decorum that I think is required in certain public places. Um, and maybe that's just me. Maybe that's an opinion. Maybe it is normal. I'm not really sure. When I look around, it sure seems that way. That doesn't mean
Mhm.
it's okay. It's just another instance of creeping normalcy.
Mhm.
Um, but I think, again, I've been real intentional about, like, when we do, a public space gathering at a restaurant or something, keep the phones put away. Or if you can't, let's stack them all on the side of the table here so that it's really awkward and obvious. If you do have to touch it, you have to go find your slab in a stack full of slabs.
Mhm. One of my guilty pleasures, and I'll define why it's a guilty pleasure, is reading or watching videos while I eat. But I am very intentional about whenever my partner sits down uh, to eat, if we're eating at the same time or overlapping, to shut it down, take
Yep.
it away. I don't think, and the reason I'm saying it's a guilty pleasure is that I do think that being more mindful of, especially of our eating, is more beneficial than absorbing content while I am eating.
Yeah.
And it's about being present, but I think it's especially important. I'm willing to indulge in it when it's just me, but especially important when my partner is sitting down to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. When my partner or any of my family members, when we eat, it's unspoken, but it's also intentional that there are no devices at the table. What we do like to do is entertain ourselves in different ways. So, like, our thing is we like to play dominoes. I play dominoes almost every night and listen
At
to
the dinner
78
table
records.
or after dinner?
during the dinner.
Really?
Yeah. We played dominoes at dinner and after dinner. Because, I mean, what we probably played like last night, we must have, I don't know how many games we played, maybe a dozen games of dominoes. And my score book, is just full of years and years of dominoes playing, like several games a night for every night for years. Well, not almost every night. But we're we're playing dominoes and we're listening to the radio, and it's usually some stream that's doing 78 spinning 78 records, right? So it's a lot of pre-war music and dominoes. We laugh at the way we live now is timeless in a way that could have been done 100 years ago, you know, um, and just as relevant today it is as then. There isn't anything wrong with that. Just playing dominoes and listening to the radio.
Yeah,
Um,
somebody would have to be there to crank the megaphone turntable uh,
yeah, well, yeah,
to
um,
spin those records.
absolutely. Um, but that's, I think, an example of the intentionality of, like, okay, um, dominoes gives us a distraction to talk about things, right? So it doesn't end up being like this strange interview, but it's a way to blow off steam without being dependent on the tech in order to do so.
Okay. So you could talk about and I've not played dominoes other than lining them up to have them fall over. So I don't know the game, but you're saying that it's not so consumptive of attention that you can't just still talk about your day or something that happened. There's space in between.
Yeah, absolutely. It's dominoes is not an intellectually demanding game at all. It's mostly chance. So it requires about the same level of effort as playing blackjack, in terms of intellectual lift. So
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of room, which isn't much, right? So that leaves a lot of room just to sort of mindlessly play and and have fun with it. But again, it's intentional, and I
Mhm.
think it's that combined with some other things, like I don't have a smart home, I have a dumb home. I don't want my home or my devices monitoring what I'm doing or changing things without my direct input. Um, those types of things. I never bring a device. My phone never comes into the bedroom. So it sleeps on the other side of the house at night. That kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, just little things that just ensure that tech is meant to be a tool for us, a tool that we control, and so I like to maintain that control.
That brings up one of the areas that I am really cautious about, not cautious enough to object to Alexa being in a common space, although I have some concerns about it. Um, but that brings up uh, Siri, Alexa, whatever the Google version is. We're on all on Apple devices where I think we've all had conversation or all had the experience where we talked about something and then started getting ads related to that. And we didn't search for it on our tablet or our computer. The only way our technology knew about it was through a conversation. Um,
Yes.
and I think I think the technical, and I'm curious if you know for sure. My hunch is that when we say, "Hey, SIRI," because I've got my phone next to me here, when we say it, that we're telling it when to start listening, but we're not telling it when to stop listening, and it probably continues on and hears some things once we initiate it. Or do you think it's just uh, programmed willy nilly to pick out conversations? This would be Alexa, all the digital. assistants, Alexa and the phones. What do you know and what are your thoughts about it?
This opens a big can of worms about privacy. But we'll just focus now on that that tech and how that works, which is it always has to be listening. Because if you say, "Hey, Google," or whatever your assistant is, um, it has to already have been listening in order for it to hear it the first time, right? We know this, which means that there is a device that's always listening all the time. And the only way that you can get beyond that is to never use that kind of device. Um, so I guess my personal stance is I'm a fierce privacy advocate because privacy means freedom. And I think that, you know, at a young age, I read 1984, which reminded me that that all means of technology can be used or abused for good or bad purposes. Tech doesn't care. It's not moral, right? But the people that own them and build them and deploy them have to make those calls, whether, and we also know that now, so if you take that, right, it's like we have a tech that can do just about anything. We live in a world where if you want something, you can have it. Like you can have anything you want, right? You know, if I want a half a dozen elephants to show up in my yard in a week, I could probably make that happen, right? That's the kind of world we live in. And so we are in a modern time constantly faced with this battle about just because you can, does that mean you should? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that same moral question has to be asked of those who build these things for the masses. Right. Now, if then we overlay, I don't know if you're familiar with Milton Friedman. He
Mm-hmm.
wrote a famous book called Free to Choose. And his assertion is that a corporation in a capitalist society or a capitalist economy exists for one sole reason, and one reason only, which is to make money, to maximize profit, right? And if we can also assume that we live in a mostly capitalist society and that there are plenty of people who are running businesses who believe that capitalism is the way to go and probably read Milton Friedman in college, like many of us did. You know, I have 2 business degrees. I'm not exempt, you know, from that knowledge. Um, we can assume that people are going to behave generally in their own best interests, right? And somebody who's running a corporation and their shareholders' best interests are to maximize profit. And what's the best way to do that is to listen. And we know that we also live in an attention economy. So I'm drawing a string here of a lot of things all strung together. But the point is that the big red flag for me, the slippery slope that takes us into a 1984 situation, is when you add all these things up the way they are adding up right now, that the path doesn't look rosy in the future, you know, in terms of freedom, privacy. We like security too, but the thing is, you know, if you want more security, you have to trade freedom. You can't have both. Ben Franklin said that. I'm paraphrasing it, but you know, I think his exact words with those that desire both freedom and security deserve neither. Right. So we have to choose which one do you like more? I like freedom more. Um, so with that comes privacy, and that's an opinion, right? Not everybody believes that, but I do. And so my opinions about the appropriate use of tech for the greater good are formed by that uh, desire for more freedom, because we live in a free. That's the basis for our country, and I believe that that freedom is really important and needs to be defended.
I think I think privacy also privacy also is tied to freedom. And you were talking about freedom versus security, right?
Yes.
So privacy, I think, is related to that freedom. Having, and I watched a little news clip yesterday about the city and county of Sarasota, south of me, implementing cameras on the streets. China is big into this.
Yes, of
And
course. Authoritarian, one party
mhm.
state, of course. They're not about freedom. Just control everything.
And they were saying, oh, these cameras only read license plates. And I'm going, yeah, right.
Okay, so
Um,
what do you have to be able to see in order to read a license plate is everything first, right?
right.
What do you need to be able to hear in order to hear a command to execute, is everything. And you're talking about, in China's case, that's a state actor. But what we have in the US are corporate actors. And so for every microphone that's sitting that I willingly accepted into my house, that's an act of corporate espionage. And what do you think they're going to use it for? For profit. Because if you believe Milton Friedman, some people do, some people don't, that their first and foremost motivation is profit, right? And so a corporation will often take a circuitous route to get there. And some interesting ways in which tech has been deployed is that a lot of the stuff that we have is free, right? I don't pay
Mhm.
for to be a member of social media per se. Um, but we also know that if you're not paying it, that means you're not the customer, you're the product, right? And so that gets back to this attention economy. The advertisers are really paying. The advertisers are really paying, and we are the product. But the platform gives us conveniences that are just amazing. Like they're amazing conveniences that will willingly sign up for. So I can be laying on my couch and I don't have to do a darn thing, and I can just yell loud enough at a device that's always got a microphone on to do something for me, you know, play a song or whatever, and I can just lay there. That's awfully convenient. It's amazing, right? What is the trade-off?
Let's
Trade-off is
take it.
privacy.
Let's take it to today. Oh, let me back up. On those cameras, I bet they are subsidized by the company that's providing them. So because if it's just law enforcement paying for the technology, they probably couldn't afford it. But if it's subsidized by corporate entities or the one who's providing the technology and maybe selling some of the data to other for-profit entities, there has to be some of that in there. Um,
I had I had a relative who had made a living selling stoplight cameras, um, and the way they would sell them to governments, right? So it wouldn't be necessarily a police department. Now the police would have access to these, the data on these things for a given civic government, but it was the city government itself that usually buys them, or a state, in the case of a highway. And the compelling sale, this person was a salesperson, this relative of mine. The compelling sale was that it was a revenue generator. And it also, well, cameras keep honest people honest, frankly, as do locks of any sort, right? So if you have a camera up there, an honest person is going to look at that and be like, well, I don't want, a ticket on my spotless record. I'm not going to run this light, I'm not even going to come close. So there's that effect, right? That's just, it modifies people's behavior. But for those who just don't care, which they also exist, capricious, chaotic people, they're going to run the light anyway. They don't care, and they're going to get a ticket in the mail. That's a revenue generator. So it really does boil down to money. Which my corollary for our society is, follow the money and you shall know the truth, right? If there's any question as to how people are behaving Or why are they behaving? Follow the money and you'll know the truth. And so that was the compelling sale, was that it will save labor costs, it'll generate revenue, it'll modify people's behavior. Um, but they said nothing, of course, about all the false positives and the erosion of privacy and the other things that causes.
So they might not have another revenue stream from the private sector that they're also using these cameras for. But I guess
They
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 could.
may, I think data brokerage is a very healthy industry. And but I just do not know for sure.
Okay. So let's take it to this moment that we are in now in history with artificial intelligence. And, we've got Sarah Silverman suing, I don't know if it's OpenAI, I think it is, about copyright infringement, that it soaked up enough of her book, one of her books, for her to be aware of it. We've got Elon's XAI that soaks up X, formerly Twitter, content. We've got the New York Times suing um, because it sounds like there might have been some entrapment there, just the way that they ran that test, but for copyright infringement. So we've got these massive AI models that are absorbing all of this content from libraries from everywhere to sell the service back to us. Um, I don't know, talk about some of your thoughts, concerns uh, related to it.
Now where we're at reminds me a lot of being at the dawn of the internet, where it was really fascinating. And things are changing so fast then as now. And it was fun to be involved in it back then. And I've had some fun with AI. And actually, I do have a business that, actually provides power for AI robots to do certain tasks. Um, franchise brokerage is not my only gig. But I think that I think that there is not a net positive yet that I can tell. Um, and I don't know exactly what that is, right? Because I don't have a crystal ball that's any clearer than anybody else's. But I do have critical thinking skills. And, I think about, well, the benefits that it offers, what are the drawbacks, right? Serious erosion of privacy, serious plagiarism, or, I think these lawsuits is that it's eroding uh, the, the economic capabilities of the creative class in some way. Um, it probably will erode the economic power of the professional class at some point. Although I
Maybe
don't think it's,
first, and
it might be. It
and
might
that
be.
might be
Lawyers are wondering how to do what to do with all this. The lawyers, the healthcare, and that type of thing. Of course, the defense industry. They're scrambling to make robots to kill us all much more easily and efficiently. Um, so
one of the characteristics of it is that it may hit this professional class and likely will hit us before it hits the blue collar class. Um, so plumbers and electricians are going to have work longer than the copywriter is going to have work.
yes,
Um, and it'll be robotics, fine-tuned robotics. And when that is prevalent, and which won't be too far behind, it looks like, from Tesla's work. Have you seen some of their demos with the dexterity that their robots have. It picked
Hmm.
up an egg very gently
Yeah.
and moving things around. And the dexterity of it folding a shirt was just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'd have trouble understanding how it would be that easy for it to remove a broken tie rod off of a 1-ton pickup.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I think mechanics and skilled trades, they could be less affected by that, and maybe a tool to help them. And I think for the professional class, it's going to be a tool to help us. But there are many people I think who are quasi professional, you know, like that may be affected more heavily by that, more
Hmm.
mundane tasks. I know that one of my clients in my other business, I'm providing power for, little AI driven robots that are on tank treads that do menial tasks that's just not even worth it for unskilled laborers to do. Like reading barcodes and checking for overheated wires and stuff like that. Um,
Hmm.
So, already your unskilled work that can be easily taken care of by a robot, and that's fine, right? Um, but I don't think the skilled trades are going to be that affected yet. Um, and I think that really, um, the the human aspect is going to be so much more valuable, right? When you combine, um, you when you combine our focus on the attention economy and just what we as individuals are paying attention to, um, it's going to place more emphasis on us applying critical thinking skills, which I don't think can be easily replaced. Critical thinking skills overlaid with emotion and opinions. This is what makes humans human.
Overlaid with what?
Emotions and opinions.
Hmm.
Um, that's what makes us who we are, right? And that isn't easily replaced. And even if you could make a perfect facsimile that's mechanical and electronic, we would know, right? We would know just deep down inside that there's no heart there, right?
Something's
So,
missing.
yeah.
I was talking to actually it was a previous podcast with an owner of a home health agency. They didn't do the medical, but they did support cooking, transportation, cleaning, etc., and companionship for seniors or people that are homebound due to medical issues.
Mm-hmm.
And we started talking about the eventual role of robots. And they're not going to, well, if you look at the movie Her, I think there will be some companionship-ish um, robots, maybe not even in physical form, that'll provide a little bit of understanding. But this owner was talking about that he could envision the robot doing the cleaning, the sweeping, those sorts of those sorts of tasks, and the backgammon and the sharing and the talking and going to the store together, even if they're in a self-driving car, that's the part that the robot can't do. And it's what you're talking about. It's what you were alluding to. And it even would apply to our animals because there's something human, animate about our interaction with our pets that
Yeah.
will not be replicated with a robot dog.
Yeah. That's right. That's
Hmm.
right. Um, you remember, what was it? Tamaguchi? Uh, like I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but it was like a little toy that you could feed it and pay attention to it.
Oh,
It
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
popular in the late 90s.
Hmm.
or around then. I mean, I think that we're, you know, maybe AI is trying to replicate that in a much more, from a companionship type of perspective. Um, but I don't know. I don't know the usefulness of that. Um,
Hmm. I
I
heard a
just,
quote, and I, I need to see who said it. I think it might have been the head of OpenAI. But this quote said, "Your job will not be taken by AI. It will be taken by someone using AI."
yep, I saw that quote, and and I figured you had read that quote because I see your enthusiasm with which you're experimenting continually with different ways to use AI, which is interesting. Uh, I think that being on the right side of history is a good thing if you believe that quote, right? Um, and I do too. I guess I'm just kind of a late adopter because I'm wary of personal freedoms and privacy, and
Hmm.
and what that does, right? Um, it remains to be seen. We live in interesting times.
I'm enjoying, okay, what I enjoy most about work and technology is taking a leading edge technology and finding an application for it that makes things more efficient, maybe just more interesting. For example, I created a GPT that will create a Zoom background for each day of the year. And
Hmm.
so if I type in a day, then it will create a background that either represents what happened in history on this day, US history, or it will illustrate National Take Your Dog to Work Day, whatever the national day is. And there are a bunch
Yeah,
of them for every day.
I remember
Um,
seeing that one background you had with the windmills and solar panels. It was like a sustainable energy day or something.
right?
Yeah.
And here I'll demo one of them that was my favorite. Let me bring it up here. um, so I'm using my creativity to solve a problem or just entertain myself. Um, where did that go? Um, oh, here's that solar one.
Yeah. Cute.
Um, where did that go? It was National Do Nothing Day, and I'm not seeing it. But it was a hammock with
Yeah.
a field, and it was just fun. Um,
That's fun.
so I'm and let's see, what am I giving up? I may be giving up a little bit of confidentiality because it's scooping up other things that I'm entering. Um, just one other example, a writing project that ordinarily took me, here it is. This is yesterday, which is National Do Nothing Day.
Ah, nice. I wish I'd have known
um,
it was do nothing day because I was doing a lot yesterday.
um, so a writing project that normally takes me a half to two-thirds of a day and a lot of intentionality to get uninterrupted time so
Hmm.
that I can gather the information, think through, and get it organized. It took me 30 minutes to do
Yeah.
that same task yesterday.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, it writes 5 times better than I do in terms of organization, fluidity, just concise sentences, even the creative parts of writing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure there are other writers, like we employ a copywriter. I have a digital marketing agency for the listeners. Well, I guess you know because it's outmarket.pro. But anyway,
Yes.
my copywriter does not feel that AI writes as well as she does, and she's probably right. So she uses it just for research. And you have to be careful because it does. I think hallucination is an interesting term for lying, isn't it? It's a
Yes.
euphemism.
Yes.
Um, so I am really enjoying the efficiency parts of that. And it is making me probably, I'm now 3 to 4 times more efficient and productive when I'm doing my work stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not working less. Um, in fact, I'm so invigorated by it. I am working more. I'll come up with an idea to or something to tweak a GPT at midnight
Wow.
or 5 a.m. So it's really extending my workday at this point. But here's one of the things that I think is true and true, where technology is neutral, that the good guys, the people with good positive motivations will use it for good, and the bad guys will use it for bad. Um,
Yep.
and some of us will be sucked in, and to an extent, you could say that what I just mentioned about extending my workday and doing some work on either end of the day because I can bring it up on my iPad. Um, that's not good
Yep.
for a good guy. I'm being presumptuous. I think I'm a good guy with good
I think you're a good
intentions.
guy. You tell
So,
funny jokes. You can't be that bad of a guy until those kind of jokes.
so anyway, talk about that a little bit from this other
Well, that's
lens.
an interesting topic, probably to conclude on, is that with great power comes great responsibility, and that's what we're doing with our tech. Over time, is creating greater and greater um, leverage points. That AI is a great force multiplier, much like the internet was, or nuclear fission was, and I think of um, I'm a fan of hard science fiction, right? I'm going to use an example from that because the reason why I like hard science fiction is that it's based in fact. Like there is no fantasy or wands or magic or anything. It's like this can all reasonably happen. Larry Niven is a really good author that I think is a giant in that genre. He had a book series where um, we were dealing with the societal effects of gaining the ability to use fusion power, right?
Hmm.
We wanted to use fusion cars and fusion airplanes and fusion homes and things like that. The problem that we had was that there was always some nut that would take a fusion reactor and wire it the wrong way and put it in a briefcase and blow up a city, right? That's what you could do because it was such nuclear fusion is such a force multiplier that the only way to get around it was to breed out psychosis and sociopathy. And as long as we're doing that, why not drop the other shoe and breed out all the other things like cancer and diabetes and heart disease and all sorts of genetic defects. Um, and so you extend this thought, and what happened was that there was something called the birthright lotteries. Like parenting was no longer a right; it was a privilege. You could only parent if you had none of these problems. So it was this form of eugenics in a way, it used as a means to breed out the murderousness and the psychopathy and just the evil intent that we have in our society, so that we would be good enough people to be able to use fusion safely in all of our cars without worrying about some nut blowing us all up out of frustration or anger or vengeance or whatever it was, right? Now, you could we could go into great detail about all the problems and issues. And yes, we almost killed ourselves in the process because wars broke out over this. But the outcome was we got fusion. AI is not that yet, but I just do not think that we are capable, getting back to your point of using it for good or evil. Tech don't care, right? It's just a force multiplier. For everybody who's trying to save the world, there's another group of people who are trying to make the most efficient killing machines possible, right? Or make the most money possible at the expense of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we have to watch out for. It's ultimately concentrations of power are very bad for humanity. It never has historically never ended well. Whenever there's an intense concentration of power, it blows up in our face in terrible ways. It always has. And that's what we have to watch out for.
It's a great place to end it, or to pause the conversation. Maybe we can continue it. And it's fascinating to me. I really appreciate your perspective on it. Let me quickly take us out. Kyle DeHaas, thanks so much for being with us. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to hear more of these types of conversations, as well as just meeting people who are doing cool things in cool areas. So, and Kyle's doing that professionally. We'll have him on to talk about that as well. So,
Thank
Kyle,
you.
thanks so much for being with us on these podcasts, and I'll let you get to your next appointment because we're both late.
Great having being part of it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. To learn more about our mission and how you can support our vision of creating co-living communities worldwide, please visit us at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. To receive advanced viewings of our podcast and other exclusive content, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Thrive Co-Living Communities. You can also learn more ways to support our mission in the show notes below. Amazon Smile, GoFundMe, Kroger, and our own Thrive Gear store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, and many other items. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.